Welcome back to Why Blank Lost. I'm David Bloomberg, and once again this week, my hopes of who we'd be talking about were dashed. But we still have plenty to talk about, as my usual co-host, Ovi, is off for his honeymoon this week, while he's been replaced by his fellow Big Brother 21 Fellowship of the Zing Alliance member, Cliff Hogg.
Howdy, 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 David. So happy to get to take Ovi's place. I know he's off having all kinds of fun, and I get to have a little fun spending the evening with you as well.
That's right. That's right. Now, speaking of Ovi's wedding, Cliff, you were able to make it. I was not.
Yeah.
But for the people out there who, like me, were not there, People Magazine did, or online at least, did a whole article and photo spread about it. So people watching, the name of the place being People is really throwing me off here. Viewers, listeners can check that out. Here is one photo that was put there. Let me try to get the
Boy, they look sharp, don't they?
yeah. So I saw all those pictures, and I saw the article. It was all very nice. Now, any good stories that weren't in the article, Cliff, that you can secretly tell us here?
Oh yeah, we had so much fun. First, anytime we get a chance, well, for Ovi and Hannah, such incredible people, to go and celebrate with them was just, I was truly honored to get to be there. They had a lot going on, so we didn't get to talk to them as much as you sometimes have with a couple getting married.
Yes.
But I got to spend a lot of time talking to Nicole and David and Tommy and Kat from my season. We shared a table. It is so funny because right as the reception was going on, we're trying to listen for the veto competition to see who's going to win this thing. Is Jimmy going to pull this thing out or not? Yeah. So even while we're off celebrating his wedding, we were very discreetly trying to keep track of what was going on with the veto competition. So you never stray too far from the Big Brother world during Big Brother season.
That's right.
We had a lot of fun with that. The other thing I really had a lot of fun doing was talking to Nicole, comparing her to Ava, because I see some similarities in the two Long Island girls playing their own game and all of that. And so I was filling Nicole in a little bit on Ava and some of the similarities I see with them. And yeah, it was just great hanging out with my fellow house guest. Yeah, if we Big Brother season 21 can still come together and be friendly with each other, then anyone can. So
I mean,
that was
at least some of you can. I noticed that there were certain names that were not on that list, perhaps. So
some of us try to go out of the way to see each other more so than others do. Yeah, we'll leave it at that.
All right. Well, thank you. Now, I'm sure Ovi will have more stories when he is back next week. I should mention, I was going to mention this at the end of the podcast, but we may be a couple days late next week again because Ovi's honeymoon got delayed a day. His flight got canceled.
Oh, no.
So it looks like we'll probably be a couple days later to give him time to catch up on everything, because I don't think he'll be watching live feeds on his honeymoon. Maybe a little bit. Maybe checking in, but he asked Hannah if he could do the podcast from his honeymoon, and that was a big no. So
yeah, for the sake of the marriage, Big Brother's way up there on my priority list, but honeymoon and Hannah may take priority.
Yeah,
at least for right now.
Yes, yeah. All right. Well, moving on to the reason we're here, we have some things to talk about with Jimmy. But when Mickey stole Riley's HOH, we thought this week was going to go down a very different and much better direction. While Mickey losing her damn mind is, of course, a big contributing factor in what ended up happening, as I said last week about Adrian being impacted by a poor HOH decision, we can't use that as a full excuse for it was Adrian's play, now Jimmy's own play. Because yes, there is plenty of blame for Mickey, but without some of the actions that Jimmy took, we wouldn't be talking about him today. So As we do each week, we will look at how Jimmy played in comparison to a set of guiding rules I originally wrote back in 2004 and have modified ever since. We will analyze his actions using what we saw on TV, live feeds, interviews, and other information. The most recent published version of the rules can be found at robhasawebsite.com/bigbrotherrules. Now, I do want to mention that I picked out the shirt I'm wearing very early in the week, as soon as Mickey started her anti-Jimmy campaign, because what the full shirt says, you could see the try harder, but the rest of it says not try harder, not to suck. So I don't want Jimmy. This is not directed at Jimmy. I mean, we'll talk about the things he did wrong, but it's really directed at almost all the players who are still there, especially Mickey and Morgan, and especially the Big Brother production team. Because, we always have some things to discuss about the week in general before we get to the rules. And the first one I want to get to is indeed the horrible editing we saw last week. There are so many things where the editing, the production has indeed sucked, and they need to try harder to not do that. Let's start with, well, okay, the three main things we'll get to, I think, are they continue to hide the dark side of Riley. They pushed Vince as the mastermind, and they ignored the real way Mickey came to her decision.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that, because I watched that Wednesday episode and I feel like I do a decent job of keeping up with the live feeds. And it was the variance from what they were showing with, especially with Vince in there and the HOH kind of throwing Jimmy under the bus. And it's like, am I just watching? I know they've got to spin their story and they've got their narratives that they want to create and all of that. But at the same time, it was so different from what we actually saw watching the live feeds about how that came about.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, when it comes to a show like Survivor, they know how it ends by the time they're editing it. So they can do that. They can change things a little bit and maneuver and the like. But in this case, like, what was the reason for some of this? Like, starting, we'll get to Vince in a minute, but starting with Riley. I know a lot has been said about him already on many other podcasts, so I don't want to spend too much time. But the show has almost completely hidden the fact that he has had these explosions where something happens that he doesn't like, and he gets super angry. He starts spouting profanities. He's yelling, and then he calms down and he goes and apologizes, and suddenly it's all okay. And this is on top of the way he treats Catherine like a possession or a prize to be won. Yet Big Brother's acting like it's some true great love story.
Well, and I think that's it right there. We are not seeing the showmances that we have in some seasons. Lord, I know of a few showmances during my season. We don't have them this season. They were thinking Lauren, Zach. It looks like there maybe Lauren and Morgan and Zach at some point was a talk. But the only thing that we have right now is Riley and Kat. And if you lose that, if you alienate the people away from the male lead of that showmance, then suddenly, what are you going to do for that segment that watches for the love and romance? And so I don't know how much that is causing them to very much soften the portrayal of Riley, or because I don't know. They showed, for example, with him just crying to Mickey after she took over and apologizing and all of that. And yet he has been, as you said, very explosive sometimes and really scary. I mean, there's a lot of people that are saying Kat's safe because we are so scared of how Riley's going to respond. Right. And sometimes I feel like it's beyond, you know that someone's going to get mad if you put them on the block. But the way some people have talked, it almost seems like it's a fear beyond just within the gameplay. It's a fear about the persona itself, the person. And I just, I feel like for whatever reason, they're definitely trying to soften that. And I think it could be for that showmance opportunity.
I mean, but like, just the way he treats Catherine, begging and pleading to sleep in the same bed and getting upset that she said that she dares have any boundaries on live TV,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and then like you said, the anger part, it first of all, it tends to come out directed at women.
Mhm.
We've noticed that.
Yeah.
And remember, he was initially planning on nominating Mickey, Morgan, and Ashley when he
Yeah.
became HOH before he lied to Mickey and said, "Oh no, we could have worked something out." Baloney. Um, and then the same is true in how he talks about them. We could list examples here forever, but one example I think highlighted this from Monday night. He got mad and told Catherine, "I'm not going to let bleeping Ashley come up to me and talk bleep to me. Tell me what I should do and what I need. That was pissing me the bleep off." And that's how he talks about and sometimes to them.
Yeah.
Yet for some reason, they, in addition to saying we're scared of how he's going to react, they still talk about what a nice guy he is, how religious he is. He talks about, "Oh, I just want to, spread the word of God around and everything." And just all this nonsense when that is not who he is.
Well, I got to say, I'm feeling a little bad that in my preseason cast preview, I'd actually picked him as one of the people that I thought everyone's going to just absolutely love. That he just seemed to be a very down home, good old boy. And yeah, I may have to walk that back a
Yeah.
little bit now that I've seen a few weeks, 30 something days of it. He's kind of letting down the cowboy hat, David. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And on top of that, he's just terrible at the game. I mean, until he had his HOH taken from him, he had repeatedly said he didn't care. He was just there
Yeah.
for a vacation. He'd give away the game to Catherine, etc. And all of a sudden now he's acting like a big brother expert, criticizing others for how they play, with, of course, those others being women. And, meanwhile, he completely screwed up because he didn't know Mickey had the special power. I
Yeah.
thought literally everyone in the house knew. I was like, this power is useless now. And I know Taryn had said the same thing basically, but yeah, I thought the same thing. It was,
Yeah.
he was so clueless and not playing the game to that point. He truly didn't know. And then he fell for their play acting of it being Ashley. And he was like going to the camera, "It's Ashley. I know it's Ashley." And boy, did he look a fool.
I think, and somewhere down the road when you do Why Did Riley Lose week,
Hopefully close.
I think a
Soon.
lot of that is going to be someone who is very unwilling to pivot and unwilling to take a step back and consider that some of their assumptions may not be correct. He just seems to me one of those that he's like a steam engine. Once you get going, it's hard to get him off track another direction. I feel like that's the way he treats Kat and him wanting to have this showmance. By God, I'm going to make it happen. It's the way he treats, the way he plays the game, who he works with or against. He just doesn't seem to have a lot of flexibility, which I think you've got to have in this game.
Yeah. All right, well, moving on to Vince for a couple minutes here. Watching the episodes last week, you already mentioned this. It would lead to the natural conclusion that Vince is manipulating everyone and got Mickey and Morgan to turn on their ally, Jimmy. But those of us who watch the live feeds know that wasn't the case at all. Mickey and Morgan talked to Keanu before Vince, not after, as they showed it. They came away from the Keanu conversation with the decision to go after Jimmy. They only used Vince for confirmation.
That's right. Yeah.
Or I should say confirmation bias, since that's really what they were doing from the moment Keanu won the veto.
Yeah, and it's so funny because it's so different from what they showed. I mean, Vince, I mean, trying to work with so many people, was working with Jimmy, and you're right. Keanu's the one who came over and started letting Morgan and Mickey know that that Jimmy was kind of double dealing a little bit, and
yeah. Even when he talked to them, I mean, Keanu is prone to delusions, usually of grandeur. And yeah, speaking of regretting, preseason picks, he was my preseason winner pick. So, but when Mickey and Morgan talked to him, he gave his usual spiel. It's not my fault. People don't like me. Someone else has caused this. And he was trying to blame Rachel, which is also often the person he either loves her or hates her at any moment. Yeah. Sometimes both, it seems. But Morgan and Mickey turned him on to Jimmy. Like, well, just kind of
Yeah.
nudged him over there. So, but he was willing to ride with it, and he told them what they wanted to hear.
Yeah.
And, of course, we'll discuss, some of that once we get to the rules. But because he was able to come up with some anti-Jimmy stuff, they bought into those delusions.
Yeah.
And then Morgan even said, well, he has no reason to lie. Are you playing Big Brother? What do you mean he has no reason to lie?
Yeah. There's a lot of lying taking place in Big Brother.
Yeah. And then she kept, this was the worst part to me. She kept idiotically saying, well, there must be a higher reason he keeps winning vetoes. Must be a higher purpose to him winning the vetoes. And it's just like, stop trying to find meaning in a meaningless situation. He won the vetoes. Have you looked at him?
Yeah.
He is a physical specimen. Gee, why does he win the vetoes? Oh, I have no idea.
Yeah, who would pick him to do that?
Yeah.
And it's getting a little off track. I think he does so well at the vetoes because he just has almost a don't give a darn attitude. He's come in. I think he's just a little more casual than some people are when he's playing, a little more free and not so worked up because he's done it so many times. I think that helps when you're up there not to let your nerves get to you. And I gotta say, Keanu's kind of growing on me as I watch him play this game.
Well, I said a couple weeks ago, or maybe it was last week, he's still delusional, but he's an enjoyable kind of delusional, as opposed to like Kelly, who just every time I see her, I get angry because she's a non-enjoyable type of delusional.
Yeah.
Same with Riley, for that matter. But getting
There's
back
a lot of delusion in this house this season.
It is filled with delusion. Maybe the shirt should say "Try harder not to be delusional." But getting back to what Morgan was saying about the higher reason, that, of course, was not the only time religion came into the discussion last week. I already mentioned Riley a bit in that regard, but one thing that wasn't shown on TV was Mickey clearly letting her religious beliefs affect the game. She was, all anti-Riley, as she should have been after the way he treated her. Yeah. But then they prayed together and she saw God in him. Mickey, you need some new glasses. Or witch god. I don't know. Later, she said she wanted to make faith-based decisions. And again, none of this makes any sense from a game standpoint. And it raised a lot of questions among the fandom as to just what she meant by those statements while targeting Jimmy. I can't speak to what was going on inside her head. But from what she said aloud, it seemed to play a role with her determining what God wants in the Big Brother house.
And I hope that's not the case. When I was in the house, I don't remember ever praying to God to let me win a competition or anything like that. I think it was a lot more, God, don't let me say something really stupid while I'm in here in the house. That was my primary prayer for 93 days. But I just don't think God's up there watching nearly as passionately as we are, considering everything else that we got going on in the world. So, yeah, I'm not sure that I have issues anytime people bring in outside reasons that don't have to do with gameplay itself, whether it's, I don't know. There's 101 different things that you could bring in from the outside world that I would like to think that people don't use to affect their decision-making inside. I'd like to think Big Brother, the game, is a self-enclosed universe and you only focus on that. And not everyone can do that.
Especially people who, many of whom apparently have never, watched more than 2 minutes of the show. So, yeah. But
that's hard. That's hard because it's, and I don't know. Sometimes you see people, I don't want to get too much in it, but you see people praying a lot. And I don't know sometimes if it's true or sometimes it's a part of a gameplay. There could be a little bit of everything mixed in together, but I don't know. Play the game based on how people are treating you within the house and not based on other factors.
Right. Now, we'll, of course, talk more about why Mickey did what she did, but I also want to discuss how she went about it. Because we saw her call Jimmy into the HOH room with her and Morgan just moments before the veto meeting and drop it on him that he was going to be the nominee. To me, I think she was just trying to make herself look and feel better by saying, "Oh, I gave him a heads up. I didn't
Yeah.
blindside him at the meeting." No, you blindsided him moments before the meeting. There's no difference. And in fact, it's even worse than that because she admitted to us she didn't want him to have time to present counterpoints. So, in other words, she made up her mind and she didn't want to potentially change it due to facts.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I think you're right. They'd had conversations beforehand saying we ought to tell him it's going to help if he ends up staying around and
mhm.
all of that. It'll help our game that we gave him a heads up, but we don't want to give him so much of a heads up that he can go around and start pitching other people or anything else. So I feel like to some degree it was just a matter, maybe a little fear factor in there of, yeah, we know we need to tell him, but I don't want to do it right now. I want procrastination, put it off just because I don't want to face Mad Jimmy.
Yeah. I mean, but they never even faced him at all. I mean, they had their back to him half of the time.
Yeah,
He was, they treated him so rudely when they did it. He was pleading for his game life. They wouldn't even look at him. They were busy putting on makeup and lotions. And, you got to get that lotion on. Got to make sure that lotion is on right that moment. And then the worst was when Mickey was spritzing herself with perfume while ignoring him. And, because we can definitely smell her through the TV, right? I mean, she's going to be on TV, got to have perfume on. And he's sitting there pleading his case, and she's just like, spritz, spritz, spritz. Sorry, spritz, spritz, spritz.
Yeah, if the idea was to give him a heads up to try to do some damage control if he stuck around, they did a horrific job of doing it because I think the way they treated him made it even worse.
Yeah.
Even a worse situation. And we heard him saying, "Hey, if I stick around, now, yeah, I know who I'm going after at this point." It didn't do what they needed to do. And if that's the case, why bother in the first place?
Right.
You've got to realize that you are talking about someone, not their real life. As Ava said at one point, this isn't an electric chair. This is just a game. But you're still talking about a very important game in this person's life. And to not even give them just a minute or two of saying, "Hey, I love you. We don't mean anything personal. It's just they didn't do any of that." It was the most discounting, dare I say, condescending way of letting someone know that we've seen in a while.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, later, shortly after nominating him, she said to him on live feeds, "I did the best I could with the time that I had," which is complete BS. She had plenty of time to talk to him, get everything straightened out. She didn't want to. She made up her mind for the reasons we'll get to in a few minutes here. And she didn't want anything interfering with that. She didn't want to be confused by the facts.
Yeah. Yeah. She let some people get in her head. And once she decided that's what it was, I don't think she wanted to have too much more internal conflict by having other people throwing in other opinions.
Yeah. All right. Well, we can move on from them to our semi-regular segment here. Julie Chenmoonves is wrong about blank. And in this case, she gave us a triple header. It's blank and blank and blank. And that was just in her interview with Dalton Ross. So the first thing she said was Vince is universally liked in the house and has done an excellent job of making himself seem loyal to so many of his housemates, and he doesn't come across as threatening. He seems like a harmless, likable, loyal housemate. Every time she opens her mouth, she gives us more and more proof that she has no idea what is actually happening in that game. Many people in the house are onto Vince, despite the show acting like he's a mastermind, which I think is a big risk of them acting like he's a mastermind. And while, normally when we record these on Friday nights, we don't, quote unquote, spoil anything that happens after the eviction. But since we're recording this after Sunday night's episode has aired, it's safe for us to say, all we have to do is look at this week's nominations as one piece of evidence that Julie was wrong.
That's right. Yeah, there's a lot of people. I mean, we've got Rachel has talked repeatedly about her fears, even within people that theoretically may have been working with them a little bit. We had Mickey talking about that. She wasn't sure about this relationship with
even
Vince
Kelly.
Yeah. There's a lot of people who are aware of Vince. I feel like it's not so much that Vince is loved by everyone around. They maybe have not seen him as much as of a threat, perhaps, as some other people in the house. But I think a lot of people have recognized, and as you said, we now see that a lot of people have identified that he's has his well, we saw how many times he was going on doing one-on-ones with someone as soon as they became HOH.
Yeah.
And we heard a lot of house guests that had very quickly pointed that out. Said
Mhm.
as soon as someone wins, Vince is going to be up there talking to him. So it's not as though people weren't aware inside that house.
Yeah, it's just that Julie wasn't aware outside of the house because,
Yeah.
she'd have to pay attention for that. Later in the interview, Julie said, I think Ashley may be one of those people who responds to whoever is the last one to have in her ear. And again, anyone who has watched the live feeds would know that is absolutely not true. There have been times when Ashley has spent literally hours trying to change people's minds. That is not something that someone as wishy-washy as Julie makes her sound would be. But of course, Julie doesn't know any of that.
Well, and I left out Ashley when we're talking about loyal or completely unanimously loved by loving Vince. Ashley from week one has, I mean, she'll spend hours trying to convince people that Vince needs to be the target.
Yeah.
Based on her own, him putting her on the block and still having a grudge on that. So, yeah, Ashley's got she's got her own set of opinions. And I do think sometimes she'll get influenced. We saw it with Mickey kind of calling her out on her support last week and all that. But at the same time, she's got her own agenda that she's trying to follow sometimes as well.
Right. She, flipped Mickey on a couple issues later in that week. She spent a long time doing it. She's, again, Julie sees one little snippet and decides that's the person's whole personality. Yeah. And then finally, we have Julie's worst take of the week. Dalton asked what she makes of Riley and Catherine's connection inside the house. And Julie said, I think it's adorable, which simultaneously made me want to throw something at my screen and throw up at the same time. Nobody, I mean, we've already talked about this. Nobody who's watched even 1 second of feeds with those two on would say it's adorable. And then she went on to say, I like that they got to know each other first as friends and got to show each other that their feelings for one another are more important than the game. This is so far from reality that it almost leaves me speechless. The only part that's true is Riley doesn't care about the game, but he never has. He just wants to possess Catherine. This is not we said it already, this is not some love story. They got to know each other and stop it. It's disgusting.
Yeah. What do they call it? The Helsinki syndrome, when someone holds you hostage long enough and eventually they start sympathizing with the hostage taker.
Not Helsinki, but it's Stockholm syndrome.
Stockholm syndrome. Yeah. Close. Yeah. Right part of the world.
Yeah.
I feel like I need to be watching Kat to see if she's blinking her eyes, giving us Morse code or something a few times. I don't. Yeah. Adorable isn't the word that came to my mind. And now is Kat's kind of starting to get the feels, or is it a bit of a strategy from her standpoint? We've heard people say that, hey, if it wasn't for Riley being right there over the top of her, she may have done on the block. So there may be some incentive for her to want to continue some kind of a working relationship. There's a big difference between working relationship and whatever Riley's got in mind, though.
Yeah.
I gotta say, and nothing against Caleb from back was at season 16, but he reminds me a little bit of Caleb having some strong feelings for Amber back in their season.
I presume you've heard the nickname some people have given Riley in honor of Caleb Beast Mode Cowboy. They call Riley Least Mode Cowboy.
Now, I haven't heard that, but that's pretty good.
Yeah,
pretty good.
All right. Well, we've knocked out almost a half hour here. So, but before we get to the rules, I do want to mention that although we don't have a poster or shirts or anything specifically for the Big Brother version of the rules, we do have for the Survivor version. So if you're a fan of that as well, you can go to robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed, scroll down to the poster and click on it and order it. You can keep scrolling and find the poster on a t-shirt or the checklist on a t-shirt. Checklist is the closest to the Big Brother rules, but not quite identical. So again, you can go to robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed for all of that. Cool. All right. Well, Jimmy acknowledged on live feeds in a discussion with Rachel that he got sloppy. He said that he'd been playing well until that point. That raises two questions. Was he playing well till that point? And was being sloppy the reason for his eviction? We'll answer both of those and discuss many other aspects of his game, as well as Mickey and Morgan's, because at RHAP, we know Big Brother, and we know why Jimmy lost.
There you go.
Now, we'll start, of course, with the first and most important rule, which is to scheme and plot. I don't think there's any doubt that Jimmy did this. He had a secret final 3 alliance right off the bat. He had several other alliances that he made along the way to try and protect himself and his supposed true allies. But then when he quickly became HOH in week 2 and had to nominate 5 people, the wheels started falling off his bus. Instead of concentrating on who would be good to get out, he became more focused on nominating people who wouldn't come after him if they survived. Yeah. It got to the point he didn't actually have a target at the end and had nominated 2 people who were supposed to be his allies, ending up, of course, with Amy heading home. And Jimmy admitted he screwed up. He thought he had the votes, but too late realized people were lying to him. His HOH fell apart due to poor scheming and strategy on his part, and it left a lasting impact.
God, it seems like so long ago. Amy in the house. Yeah, I'd kind of forgotten about that whole deal. Having to nominate 5 people is never a great way at the start of a season to make things happen, especially someone like Jimmy, who most definitely was trying to spread himself across that whole house, while everyone's trying to get their feet underneath them and such. And so, yeah, he's trying to work with a lot of people, and suddenly it's almost by default. Some of the people ended up having to go up at the end. And as you say, when you play out of fear to some degree, and we've seen that a lot of weeks, and he certainly was susceptible to that as well.
Yes. Now, in addition to the specific scheming aspect of this rule, there's also an important part of the rule that says players need to remember to check in with your allies frequently to both ensure they're good and also give them comfort. And this was something that Jimmy completely neglected to do. While he was making those other alliances, what he wasn't doing was telling Mickey and Morgan that he was doing it.
Yeah.
So what happens when your allies hear about you making these other alliances without them and you haven't mentioned it to them? Well, they're going to presume the worst. And frankly, most times in Big Brothers, it would be the worst.
That's right. I mean, and as Will said at one point, I can't remember if it was AV's talking to, he said, look, when you're playing all sides, sometimes that means that you have no sides.
Right.
And it certainly does come down to the point of, if there's no distinction from one group to the other, how do you know that you truly are his top pick? And as you say, if there's some coordination ahead of that, then certainly that makes a difference. The other thing I thought too was, I feel like sometimes Jimmy was doing too much leadership of these different groups. You know, we always say if someone comes to you with an alliance, you don't say no.
Right.
But it seems like he was trying to run too many different groups at the same time, as opposed to just trying to stay good with a lot of different groups. And so when you're kind of seen as a leader of a whole bunch of very disparate groups of people, how do you trust anything that's going to go on? And eventually people are going to compare notes after a few weeks, after they do get their feet up underneath them and start having some loyalties to some people in this house.
Yeah, and that was his problem. If he had told them, look, I'm going to be making these other alliances to protect us. Okay, then they know. But if you don't tell them, I mean, you literally, and you know this certainly better than I do, you literally have nothing but time in the Big Brother house. Yeah. There is no excuse for not talking to your allies. Even if you want to keep your alliance a secret, which was their excuse about not talking. But as this rule specifically says, going days without speaking to an ally can seem like forever, making one or both of you think something is wrong. If you're worried about getting caught, it doesn't take much. Just reassure your ally that you're still on the same page. And Jimmy did not do nearly enough of this. Now, look, I'm not saying Mickey and Morgan did. They should have been checking in with him too. But the difference is they were the ones who had the power. So their feelings counted more than his did right now.
Well, and to some degree, and Jimmy was talking to a lot of people. He was trying to form a lot of different alliances. But even just the way he was talking to so many people, when you're in that house, and you suddenly see someone that you're supposed to be working with, and they seem to be spending a lot of time in one of these back bedrooms. They could be talking about the weather outside or the
Mhm.
most innocuous conversation, but you don't know that. And as you said, all the time in the world, the old paranoia starts to kick in and you start wondering more and more. So even if it was something as basic as saying, hey, I just spent the last 3 hours talking to Keanu, and as typical, he didn't really have anything to say, but
Yeah,
this is what we did. But he didn't do that. He would just go do it and then come back, uh, and so everyone started getting suspicious
right,
just because he was spending so much time with other people.
right. And then another benefit of checking in with your allies is, as this rule further says, it can help you make sure they're acting normal towards you. Because once people start to flip, they often can't hide it very well. And you can pick up on that and try to reverse course. Jimmy did have a conversation with Mickey and Morgan that seemed a bit off to him. I think it was the night before. It was
Yeah,
Wednesday night,
yeah,
I believe. Um, but he really didn't pursue it further. He didn't try to, it's kind of like the husband and wife where the husband is like, she's acting weird towards me, but I'm
mm,
not going to find out what it is. I'll just, whatever it is, it'll pass. And I mean, at that point, Mickey's mind was made up anyway. But
yeah,
he needed to have that constant line of communication open, uh, saying, hey, I'm going to make this other alliance. It'll help protect us. It'll keep us off the block. I'm going to go talk
yeah,
to those people and get information. It doesn't take long to convey that.
yeah.
And, by the time they blindsided him, the time for explanations was gone and they weren't listening anymore.
Well,
Jimmy even, go ahead.
yeah, I was gonna say once they make that decision and they've kind of cast him on the
Mhm.
opposition, even if he tries to explain himself, even if he says, "Look, I've always been with you," it doesn't matter because now you've made him a target. You're always going to worry that he's going to come back on you as a target.
Right.
So you've got to do it before they take such decisive action. And I feel like I remember a conversation right towards the end where he was saying, and I think Vince has said something similar about, I actually have declared, I've got my loyalties. Maybe I just haven't done a good enough job of making sure those people understand those loyalties. So
Yeah.
I think he was aware as well. It was just too late by the time that happened.
Yeah, I mean, Jimmy even tried explaining to Mickey on live feeds that, of course, he said different things to others. He was protecting the secret of their alliance,
Yeah.
and we saw him say on the show and the live feeds, and he further expanded on it in his interview with Mike Bloom. Everything he was doing was to prevent the three of them from being on the block together, which
Yeah.
makes sense because you don't want to be an obvious duo or trio. Uh, but at least under normal circumstances, I guess if you're Riley and Catherine, it's okay. But again, he was doing all of this without cluing them in.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they came to their own conclusions, bolstered by what they'd heard from other people. And once they heard this from him afterwards, they didn't believe it. Well, of course, he's
Yeah.
going to say that now. You can't, I mean, yeah, you can't go out, make other alliances, not tell them, and then later say, oh, those were never real.
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean they weren't real? Why didn't you tell us then?
And we talked about people playing out of fear, about Jimmy playing his HOH out of fear. I feel like in some ways, him not telling them was also him playing the game out of fear of, if the other side gets power, as much as I may say I
Mhm.
don't like floaters and all of that, if it comes down to it, if I haven't declared to one side, it makes it easier for me to flip if I ever need to flip. So
Yeah,
I think there was some ulterior motives in not filling them in as much as he
yeah,
should have.
yeah. All right. Well, we can move on to the second rule, which says not to scheme and plot too much and to keep your scheming secret. And you've already mentioned some of the issues with the number of alliances he was forming, and it does seem like this was the biggest problem for Jimmy. Now, I want to say "seems" is the key word, but like we say so often on this podcast for both Survivor and Big Brother, when you're in the game, perception is reality. If the other players believe that you're overplaying, well, then that's what counts. And we certainly know that was the case for Jimmy because we've already, we just discussed that. And it's also interesting that even Jimmy has come to think this of himself in retrospect. He told Rob and Taryn in their interview that he came in hot. He told Dalton Ross he was over aligned too quickly.
Yeah.
But then he also said he thinks a lot of people weren't playing the game. And I think he's absolutely right about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
He further noted the game starts before we even get there. And if you're not playing, like who plays Monopoly and leaves their piece on go to just see what other properties people are going to buy?
Yeah.
I'm going out into the board and trying to buy a property. Now, I agree with the points he's making, but the problem is if you're in a race and you take off and you're the only one moving forward while everyone else is standing still or going backwards, it looks in comparison like you're going way too fast.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting point that I hadn't thought of, Dave. But in another season where you didn't have so many people seemingly wanting to fly a little under the radar and not win comps and all that, would he have been better suited for others where he would have fit in with more like-minded folks that were
Yeah.
wanting to do something? And there's something to be said for that. It may have certainly could be a whole different Jimmy experience that we would be witnessing with a different cast. Because you're right, a little bit of a vacuum of this game of people waiting for someone else to make that first move, and he obviously was more than willing to do it.
Yes. Yes. Now, Jimmy did acknowledge in his interviews and in live feeds during the last couple days that he should have listened more than he talked. And that is always good advice in these games, because if he had done that, he might have realized what the overall perception of him was in the house. Going back to our discussion a few minutes ago about checking in, whether he was indeed playing too hard, too fast, the fact was that other people believed it and they were spreading it. So even though Jimmy was loyal to Mickey and Morgan, he did things that obviously could easily make them question that, as we already discussed. And it just did not seem to ever occur to him.
Yeah. No, he was, and yeah, we keep talking Mickey and Morgan, yet I saw his interactions with Rachel, his interactions with Vince, and he was just all over the place.
Right.
And I understand completely why Mickey and Morgan were nervous, having seen the way he played the game.
Yeah, especially like I said, going back to he didn't tell them anything, and if you see that and that, just him not even thinking about it, like in his mind, he locked it in with them early and then never had to talk to them again. And I have some more thoughts about that in another rule, but yeah, I mean, the idea of what he was doing just kept growing. He was seen as playing all sides. He did snaky things for no reasons. He got a reputation for crapping all over the house with gossip. And the fact that he was truly aligned with Mickey and Morgan did not matter, because they were hearing these other things, and they were already still mad at him for what happened with his own nominations and Amy's eviction. And it got to the point where Mickey and Morgan got just that complete tunnel vision on Jimmy and ignored everything else.
Yeah. And yet we're still somewhat, I mean, we're a third of the way into the season, but I still feel like we're in some ways in the early stages to some degree. And when you first start, people are just looking for any excuse for the target not to be me. I mean, look at Ashley, Showergate, day number 1 or 2 or whatever it was. People are just looking for an excuse. And if you hear a lot of people coming to you saying, "Oh, that ass Jimmy, he's double dealing and this and that," and you hear enough people say that, well, suddenly you're going to say, why am I going to fight for this guy if it doesn't sound like anyone else wants to fight for him? It's easy to jump on the bandwagon and say, hey, I'm not going to get any blood on my hands or offend anyone by going after him, because obviously everyone else is. And I think we heard some of that with Mickey saying, I just keep hearing his name coming up. I just keep hearing his name mentioned. So you're right. Perception's reality. Enough people start saying it to you, and you're just going to join right in with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Mickey told Ava she had known for weeks that Jimmy was the one who had been pitting Keanu against her and Morgan, which was false. Morgan told Mickey that he was lying to their faces all the time, which was false. We could go down a whole list of false things that they believed.
Yeah.
And Maggie said on one of the live feed updates with Taryn, Mickey and Morgan just took a lot of these claims at face value because it fit their narrative.
Yeah.
I mean, Mickey even told Jimmy that he should have told Keanu that he was the problem instead of Mickey and Morgan, because then Keanu would only be going after one person instead of two.
Yeah. Yeah. That was quite the
What?
interesting conversation.
And then Mickey and Morgan thought Jimmy was in the wrong for not taking accountability for things he didn't do.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
what? None of it made any sense, but none of it mattered because they had those blinders on based on his reputation in the house, what they'd heard from others, perception. That was what mattered to them.
Confirmation bias.
Yes.
Right there. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, there were also a relatively few examples of Jimmy actually, saying things he shouldn't have, which helped bolster the bad reputation when you sprinkle in a few true things among the false things. A perfect example was when he vented to Catherine about Morgan and said he didn't know if he could trust her. Even worse, he stupidly told Catherine that Mickey and Morgan wanted him to put Riley up.
Yeah.
And that combined with all the other things he said that weren't real, but still made their way back to Mickey and Morgan as if they were.
Yeah. Yeah. And there was, I can't remember, there were one or two, and it's been too long, David. I've slept since then, but it seems like there were one or two things that he had said that was said to one person and it got back to that person eventually. And so there's some things that he couldn't deny, and that's what happens when you talk too much.
Right.
Sometimes.
Right. Now, I do have to say, and this isn't about Jimmy per se, but I laughed near the end of the week when Morgan said, I think Jimmy is painting me as the villain that is orchestrating everything. And all I could think of was, wow, Morgan, it must really suck to be painted as the villain behind every bad thing in the house. That's terrible. Good thing you and Mickey have never done that to anyone.
That's right. It's so funny watching people who, while they're on the right side of the house, they are the most confident, dare I say, cocky people in there. But as soon as things don't quite go their way, it is a woe is me, Eeyore mentality. And you reap what you sow sometimes on that. And we've heard Ava mention that a couple times here recently as well. So yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah. All right, we can move on to the third rule, which talks about the need to be flexible. While we've talked a lot about incorrect perceptions in the first two rules, I think it was correct perceptions of Jimmy that hurt him in this rule. So how do you think he did here?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because there's some parts of me think he was a little, would I say, a little too flexible. If you can define that as not being committed enough where you want to go, then that could be the case. I don't see him necessarily as suffering too much from that. He was talking a lot of people.
Let me reel back the tape for you here, because I think that this was a major issue for him, because obviously Mickey and Morgan made a clear mistake in turning against Jimmy. But he caused the initial distrust in large part because of how he handled his HOH.
Sure.
And that is where his inflexibility came in, because he made the decision to nominate Will and Amy. He acted like he was willing to talk to his allies about it, but then whenever anyone suggested anything else, he shot it down. He's like, no, I can't do that person. I'm stuck doing them. They're the only two people I can do. And it was clear his mind was made up. Nothing anyone said would change it. And, part of the problem was that he made up his mind not necessarily based on the best game move, but because of that fear that we've already talked about.
Yeah.
And fear-based thinking is generally incredibly resistant to logic. Just look at the world around us and you can see that. So it's perhaps not surprising that he wouldn't listen to anyone else, but it certainly doesn't make it okay for him to have done that. He needed to get past all that, actually consider all of the options. And both Mickey and Morgan were mad at him about that at the time. And it didn't take a whole lot to jolt them back to remembering how they felt about it.
Yeah, and that's interesting, because it's been a while, but when you're an HOH, it's not just about exerting your power in the terms of nominations. It's about using that opportunity to form tighter bonds with some other people, and part of that is indeed getting some opinions and showing some people that you're willing to make them part of the HOH and feel like they're part of the process. And when you shut that down, that doesn't help someone feel like it's a partnership. It's more of an autocracy, I suppose, a dictatorship. And so, yeah, perhaps he suffered some of that when he was doing his HOH.
Yeah. Now, once Jimmy was nominated, he was talking to Rachel, and she told him he needed to listen more. And he even acknowledged that he sent home an ally and it was a bad move, and he should have listened to her in particular. But of course, by then it was way too late. However, even after he was evicted, he still made excuses in interviews about the situation. For example, he told Mike Bloom that to avoid suspicion, Mickey and Morgan didn't want to be around him, so he didn't spend as much time with them. Then they would pop in and tell him what he should do, which made him want to do the opposite.
Well,
yeah, I mean, there's multiple problems there. First of all, It's not an excuse. Again, there was plenty of time. Let's just go right back to that. There was plenty of time for them to hash it all out before he needed to nominate replacements. Yes, Mickey and Morgan are the types who come in and tell you what to do. We have seen that.
Yeah.
But they were also correct. And he needed to listen to them. He needed to dedicate the time, as we talked about in the first rule.
Well, and you have to realize it has to be a partnership. No one wins Big Brother by themselves, no matter how good they think they are. You have to have other people who are tighter with certain relationships that can bring you information and give you the bigger picture. No one has the complete picture in that house. And when you don't, it's when you make that bad decisions. And Mickey or Morgan giving him other bits and pieces that he maybe hadn't heard, that doesn't mean they're a better player than he is. It just means they've talked to different people, and you've got to put all those puzzle pieces together. And the fact that he saw that as somehow them trying to take over or to run his game, you can't look at it that direction, that way. That's not how you treat allies that you're trying to work with. You've got to you've got to all contribute so that y'all have an understanding of what you do going forward.
Yeah. All right. Well, going to the fourth rule, it says the players should not let their emotions control them. I feel like Jimmy did pretty well here, actually. I don't know if you'll agree, since you chuckled there when I mentioned it.
I think from gameplay, he probably did. I think of it more from just an emotional Jimmy, sometimes very much wanting to be over the top. He said several times, I just want to put on good TV. I want good TV. He maybe should have focused on playing good Big Brother a little bit more. But he was very out there emotionally and all of that, I think, in some ways. But from a gameplay standpoint, I don't have a huge issue with that.
Yeah, I mean, he was telling other people to keep game and personal separate. From what I saw, he did. Ironically, after Mickey nominated him, she told him she learned this from him.
Yeah.
But as we've discussed, she may have said it, but she clearly didn't do it because there was a lot of emotion tied up in the way she saw things there. Still, that was her being a poor student. Jimmy, as the teacher, did fine.
I'm trying to think about it. I think he did okay with that. I know even when Rachel first came in, I remember we saw some early interviews with him saying, she's got to go. She's got to go. And feeling very much a certain way with having a returnee in the house. But I think from a logic standpoint, he saw some merit to working with her. And so, I feel like he was okay. I'm okay with that part.
Yeah. All right. Well, the fifth rule says players need to pretend to be nice and play the social game. Almost everyone said they love Jimmy personally in the first half of their sentences, just before they continued the sentence by saying, but we didn't like it. I didn't like him in the game.
Yeah.
So how do you think he did here in terms of his social game and pretending to be nice and all?
I think he did okay. I mean, I think maybe towards the end when people started piling on, there were some accusations that, he's, maybe had been a little fake with his play and all that. But for the most part, people did like him. He was a fun person. There's a lot of people who have said, hey, I want to go hang out with this guy once we're all done with the season. He'd be fun to hang with, even the folks that were maybe against him. So I think he was a friendly enough guy and didn't, there's some people in his house that just don't have the kind of personality that makes for everyone want to hang out and talk to him a lot. But for Jimmy, I don't think that was the issue. in some ways, maybe that's why he had so many issues, because he was such a personable type person that it was easy for him to talk to a lot of people and have a lot of people really liking Jimmy, which may have made certain people that much more paranoid when they saw other people having so much nice experiences with Jimmy while they talked to him.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because, like I said, they would talk about how much they loved him. But then some of them would also say things indicating they didn't love him so much after all. Like early on, Amy, Ashley, and even Rachel talked about how they didn't like his mean girl energy and he could take it too far sometimes. And Amy told Will that Jimmy was a mean-spirited person who thought he could get away with it by being funny and called him a bully. Now, I do think a lot of that simmered down as they got to know him better. I think that was a lot of initial reaction there. But I also think some of that impression lingered. And again, he didn't do a lot to stop it. I think sometimes he encouraged it. Like in his arguments with Keanu that involved his rehearsed overacting speeches. He admitted to Mike Bloom that he could have toned down the dramatics, but then he wouldn't have been true to himself. And that's the real Jimmy, even with his own family. I find it hard to believe he rehearses dinner speeches with his own family, but you never know. Maybe he does. But the main thing is, Jimmy, you're playing a game, and that means not always being the real Jimmy. I mean, last week, I got so frustrated with Adrian for saying, well, I was playing with honesty because that's who I am in real life. Well, it's the same thing here. This isn't real life. This is a game. You need to change the way you behave.
Yeah, it's hard. Everyone says they're going to do it when they get in there, and sometimes it's just hard to go against who you are in the real world. But I don't believe that's Jimmy in the real world. I mean, I feel like he is a very extroverted character, probably no matter where he is, Big Brother, elsewhere. But there was just a lot of him maybe overthinking some of the conversations he wanted to have. And again, I think a little bit of that was wanting to make sure that he was this big personality on the game of Big Brother and not thinking as much about how that would be received by certain other people.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I mean, maybe that's exactly it, because he did understand at times that it's a game, and that means not acting quite like you would in real life. He told Dalton Ross that he basically, pretended to be nice to Keanu and never truly made up with him. He said, at the end of the day, am I friends with him? No. Do I like him? No. Was that very painful to pretend to like him and try to work with him? Yes. But one of my strategies here was to try to neutralize threats before they became threats. So I always wanted Keanu to feel good with me going into an HOH. So, he knew he had to pretend in this instance. I mean, it didn't help, but he tried in certain instances anyway.
Yep. There you go.
So, all right, well, we can go to the 6th rule, which warns against being too much of a threat. And for this rule, I would say we have 2 different situations. So here's my thoughts on them. First, Mickey was convinced that Jimmy was a huge threat to her, which was part of why she claimed she nominated him. But the thing is, as we've discussed, she was flat out wrong. He was the opposite of a threat to her. He was actually protecting her.
Yeah.
Now, we've already discussed the reason she saw it the way she did. But the second part of how this rule impacted him, I think, was that once he was nominated, as he told Dalton Ross, I was too big of a target and too big of a fish in this game to be sitting on the block and to not be voted out. So, once Mickey put him up there were just too many people who saw him as a threat and were actually right about it. So the person who nominated him was wrong to think he was a threat, but the people who voted him out, they were mostly right to see him as a threat. Now, this should have made Mickey realize how wrong she was, because if everyone else agrees with you, including those you are not aligned with, you should reevaluate. But she doesn't seem to have that gear. She kept pushing for his eviction, even, when she didn't have any actual power left for the week. It's almost everyone else was happy to go along with it because he was a threat to them.
Yeah. And I remember, and I wish I could remember who had the conversation or talked about it. There were people who said, look, this isn't Mickey's best game move. This is
Right.
she's making the best game move for the other side in doing this, and she just wasn't aware of that. Maybe a little too much tunnel vision on her part as well. That uh, and unfortunately, she's not the only one that's done that this
Yeah.
season of
Oh, no.
putting people up that
Again, try
even if
harder not to suck,
yeah, even if she had her suspicions about Jimmy that maybe he is double dealing, maybe he's not as tight with us as you would think. Uh, there's still people that are more opposed to
Right.
you than he is. So why go to the suspicious one when you got the bigger targets out there? Yeah, but you're right. Once he was up there and people start piling on and people start comparing notes even more, it's too late at that point in time.
Yeah. 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 I mean, she should have just realized it sooner. Like I said, if your enemies are telling you to put him up, that shouldn't be encouragement for you to put him
That's
up.
right.
That should make you think about it.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Yeah, she had a lot of people whispering in her ear with all of the same name, which again, if you're playing out of fear, you don't want blood on your hands. Well, you may take that as a good sign that you can do it, but does that really further your personal game? Maybe not so much.
Yeah. All right. Well, the seventh rule says to trust almost nobody. And clearly we could see a problem here with Jimmy's alleged final three alliance with Mickey and Morgan. He trusted them completely. He truly never thought they would turn on him, at least anytime soon. On Thursday afternoon, just hours before his eviction, he told Rachel he really thought he could trust those two. And Rachel responded wisely, trust no one. It's Big Brother. As with a couple other things we already discussed about her telling him, she was right, but it was too late.
Yeah. I fell victim to the same thing, trusting people maybe I shouldn't have trusted. But is that part of someone who is so confident in their game and their gameplay that, and maybe it gets back to you talking about flexibility and the rules, that there wasn't enough flexibility once he had locked on with these two. He didn't have the flexibility to ever then step back and consider that maybe they aren't to the level I thought they were when I first agreed. He was already locked in and wasn't willing to change that position because he should have not ever assumed that they were there just to help Jimmy get to the end of Big Brother, that everyone has their own goals, their own objectives. And just because they match up for a week or two doesn't mean they always match up. And he just made the assumption that because they were with me when we first started, surely they'll be with me going forward. He couldn't realize that maybe they were seeing something different than he was.
Yeah. Again, it comes down to communication. And since he hadn't, communicated with them really, he couldn't notice that. And, I know we've talked a lot about Mickey and Morgan flipping so suddenly on Jimmy, but we've also mentioned how the seeds were planted a couple weeks earlier. And I mean, I had even forgotten about this until I started going through my notes for this podcast. But back on July 20th, during his HOH, Morgan and Mickey talked to each other about wanting Jimmy out before jury because he swayed too many people and they thought he'd hold a grudge for them voting him out at the jury.
Interesting.
Now, we did not see them focusing on these points as much in Jimmy's last days. But it must have still been back there in their minds somewhere, which again shows how he trusted them so much. But at the same time, they had already been losing their trust in him.
Yeah. Once you lose trust, whether it's for a real slight or an implied or perceived slight, once that happens, it's hard to ever get back to the same place you are. You're always going to have that suspicion, which maybe isn't a bad thing, but he obviously never, maybe it's a fact that he never took what they said with enough merit or weight to question where they were going and what they were doing. If he'd listened more about some of what they were trying to throw his direction, maybe he would have been more suspicious of them because they weren't pushing the same thing he was, but he wasn't listening enough to actually take that into consideration.
Yeah. All right. Well, it is about time to wrap things up here for him. What are your final thoughts about Jimmy?
he was entertaining. As I said before, though, I wish he had worried less about making good TV and more about playing the game of Big Brother himself. Knowing how to roll a ball around a little maze may have helped him a little bit there at the end.
Wait,
but,
hold on. Let me move out of the way. See, there he is.
I kind of one of my specialties, but he didn't quite do what he needed to do. It wouldn't have mattered. I think the die was already cast at that point in time. If he had survived this week, he already too big a target. Too many people that are starting to point fingers at him. If it wasn't this week, it would have been within the next week or two. So, unfortunately, I do think he came in playing a little hard. Having 5 nominations to make in his HOH is a tough way to start your season. Frenchie says hello. He kind of went through some of the same stuff, but yeah, he's certainly a victim of his own actions as well. With the way he played a lot of people, and as you said, communication just not always there.
Yeah. Well, as I said just a couple moments ago in the 7th rule, Mickey and Morgan lost their trust in Jimmy 2 weeks prior to them actually pulling the trigger against him. And that really shouldn't have been a surprise to us because many of us thought Jimmy's bad HOH week would come back to haunt him immediately. But it had been a couple weeks and he seemed to have escaped potential repercussions and he mended those wounds. But Mickey and Morgan had just a small Band-Aid on those wounds and they got ripped open again. We could say there was really no legitimate reason for that to happen, and we'd be right. But that's the problem with open wounds. They can easily get reinfected if they aren't treated properly. Yeah. And Jimmy never even realized he'd made the wounds, so he certainly didn't heal them. Mickey and Morgan had all sorts of reasons / excuses for why they flipped against Jimmy. Most of them were simply wrong, which is what made this such a bad move for them. There's no doubt Jimmy screwed up his HOH, but Mickey decided to say, hold my beer, and target the person who was truly protecting her and Morgan the most and make her HOH even worse than his. But as we've said, that doesn't absolve Jimmy of any wrongdoing. For one thing, Mickey and Morgan didn't realize how much Jimmy was protecting them because he didn't tell them how much he was trying to protect them. Communication is key in an alliance, and it was completely missing in this one. He rarely checked in with them. He didn't fill them in on the other alliances he was making and how it would help them, etc. He had excuses for why he hadn't done it, but the simple fact is there was plenty of time for him to do so and still keep their alliance secret. To make matters worse, the original wound I talked about stemmed in large part from his lack of communication while he was HOH, or more specifically, his lack of listening to his allies. As I mentioned, Jimmy later admitted he made a wrong move in nominating Amy and causing her to be evicted, and he should have listened to Rachel at the time. I would add that he also should have listened to his other allies too, especially the ones who ended up sending him home. If there's one thing future players can learn from this, it's that an alliance can be like a relationship. You can't just say that you'll always be together and then leave it at that. You need to talk, share information, discuss how you're feeling about things. Mickey and Morgan only listened to others saying things about Jimmy and didn't even check with him. But Jimmy began the cycle of failed communication in this alliance during his own HOH, and it just took a couple weeks for the repercussions to circle back to him. And that is why Jimmy lost.
Here. I agree with it. Well, the problematic Jimmy and Mickey HOH is, I'm sure glad we had that Lauren HOH in between to show us how it should be done.
Huh? That's right. I think she's still deciding who to nominate. Again, the shirt is directed at everyone there. Try harder not to suck. All right, well, we will have our predictions in a moment after a few other pieces of information. And in addition, if you want our full thoughts, we are all over social media where we discuss Big Brother and other topics. Cliff, where is the best place for people to find you?
Well, on Instagram and Twitter, cliff.hogg. Easy to find me on both of those. But the shows I'm doing are all on YouTube. You can find my channel out there, Cliff Hogg 3. And I'm doing my Monday night
Cliff
shows,
Hogg
but
3. So there are 2 other Cliff Hoggs out there who had
or maybe
YouTube accounts?
I'm really bad at setting up my accounts. It took a few tries before I could make it happen. I think it's Cliff Hogg. They just do a search for Cliff Notes and you'll find it out there. But I do a Monday night show, live show, and then every morning I'm doing not the in-depth that other folks do. I'm doing a quick little 20-minute recap of what happened overnight. And you can find me out on YouTube on all that.
Okay. Well, I am, of course, all over the place. You can find all of my accounts by going to Linktree/David Bloomberg. And, it lists all the different places that you can get to me there. Or you can find me directly on Blue Sky as at David Bloomberg. Cliff, you have a Blue Sky account. You just don't seem to use it very much.
Yeah, I need to get back in the habit.
Yeah.
Or I say back into. I need to get into the habit. I think you're the one that turned me on to Blue Sky, in fact, David. But yeah, I am out there. So hey, if people want to come out and send me messages, give me some incentive to be more active on it, I'd love to do it.
All right. Well, definitely. I encourage everybody to come over to Blue Sky for all the Big Brother discussions because so many of the big updater accounts and others have moved over there. And of course, ever since Big Brother began, I've been posting at least 3 or 4 videos per day, sometimes as many as 6 on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram, where you can find me as at David Bloomberg TV. It's a combination of, I've got live feed clips, I've got episode clips where I give my thoughts, and I've got just my own general thoughts where I'm talking it through, or sometimes, yelling at the players and ranting. Those seem to do the best. But like I said, I'm at David Bloomberg TV on all of that. Also, before we get to predictions, I do want to just mention again, I know I mentioned it earlier, but that Ovi, I expect Ovi to be back from his honeymoon next week, but because of that glitch in his travel plans that I mentioned, we will probably be a couple days late again. So don't be surprised, when we're not there Saturday morning. I know I've heard from a number of you who are waiting Saturday mornings, but in this case, it'll probably be Sunday night, Monday morning by the time it shows up in the feed. All right, with that, we have our predictions. Now, under normal circumstances, we don't even talk about what's happened in terms of who won the HOH or anything like that because, we cut it off at the eviction. But since we're recording this after Sunday night's episode aired, we get the benefit of being able to talk about who won the HOH and what the nominations were. And that, of course, was Ava. And she nominated Vince, Zach, and the ever-present Keanu. Now, based on his history, I can't predict Keanu will lose. Both veto and blockbuster. So I expect him to end up safe. Yeah. Zach still has his $10,000 special veto. So if he isn't safe, it means he's going to make a really dumb move. Right. That leaves Vince and 1 or 2 other possible people who we don't know yet as of this moment. Not knowing who those other 2 people might be, well, 1 or 2 people, but knowing how much Vince has been getting on people's radars, despite what Julie believes, I'm going to predict that he ends up going this week and that mastermind edit will quickly fall apart.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, we've heard a lot of people that were comparing Jimmy's game to Vince's game and seeing some similarities in terms of having a lot of, as Ava said, I just a lot of people that are recognizing that he's been involved with a lot of different groups. So I think Zach, I'm not 100% convinced, even if Zach didn't use his power, which I think he should, but even if he didn't, I'm not sure that he necessarily, based on what we're saying now, would have the votes to go home. And Keanu has almost crossed that threshold of being such an easy target that no one wants to maybe waste an HOH sending him out the door. So I think Vince is very vulnerable at this point in time, unless something really crazy happens over this next week.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will see what happens there. So as we wrap up here, I want to encourage people to check out the RHAP patron program at robhasawebsite.com/patron. There are a number of patron-only podcasts, some general, some specifically for Big Brother, like The Slop, plus other perks like the Facebook groups and Discord. You can help support shows like ours and everything on the network by becoming a patron at robhasawebsite.com/patron. Also, make sure you're subscribed to all the RHAP podcasts by going to WeKnowRealityTV.com, or as it says at the bottom of the screen there, WeKnowBigBrother.com. If you go to WeKnowBigBrother.com and subscribe, you'll get all the Big Brother podcasts. If you go to WeKnowRealityTV.com, you'll get all the reality TV in general podcasts. So, you get to pick and choose what you want to subscribe to, or just subscribe to everything. That's even better.
There you go.
So just go ahead, do that. Make sure you're subscribed to everything. And also, we want to thank Scott St. Pierre and Jessica Sterling and the whole RHAP and Reality TV RHAP-Ups behind the scenes team for all the work they do, editing, posting, and everything else, because we really appreciate it. And of course, Cliff, thank you for a great episode. It was a lot of fun to have you. Also, I forgot to mention, it was really nice of Will to not go by his actual name so that you would still be the Cliff of Big Brother.
Yeah, I've got to give him props. Cheering for the old guy this season, but hey, Will Clifton, my name's William Clifford. There are a lot of similarities there, so we'll see how he does.
I didn't know that your first name was William.
yeah, very close. So he's probably a little too old to be named after me playing the game of Big Brother. So just one of those things. Well, always a pleasure, David. Thank you so much for having me on. Ovi, I would say Ovi's lost is my game, but I think Ovi's doing fine himself.
Yeah, I think Ovi's gain is also your game. This was, a win-win situation.
There you go.
And yes, as I've mentioned, we will be back next week with the newly married Ovi. Hopefully, he'll be in a great mood and happy to discuss whatever ends up happening on Big Brother. And of course, if you can't wait that long, you can reach us on social media. So until then, everyone, bye.
Cheers, guys.
This is RHAP. We know reality TV.